Creepypastas are great, but what's a horror story you have experienced? One of my friends asked me to watch her pet lizard while she was gone on vacation for the summer. So one day, I'm walking over to her house to do my thing. When I get to her driveway, I see there's a white van sitting in there that I didn't recognize. I could clearly see there was someone in the driver's seat waiting for something, so I just quickly walked past it to the front door. By the time I was done doing my thing, the van was still sitting in the driveway. I decided I would just get home as fast as possible. So I triple-checked that I locked the front door and began walking. As soon as I started walking onto the sidewalk, the van turned on, pulled out of the driveway, and started following close behind me with its headlights on. I started to worry but just decided to walk faster. Van started speeding up. Walked even faster. Van sped up. Now I was pretty scared, so I pulled out my phone, looked at it, and made a confused expression with my hands to make it look like I just realized I was late for something. Then I started running as fast as I could in the direction of my house. The van started speeding after me. I didn't stop running or look back until I fell onto my driveway. I then saw the van slowly climbing up my street, but when it was about halfway up my street, it stopped and turned around. My neighbors were out watering their lawns and such that day, so I assumed they left because of that. Well, now I was in a situation I assumed was like this, too many red flags to overlook. I was out biking one day, and this car was driving up and down the road I was on, which was about 2 miles away from my house. I decided to go a bit farther than I had before and explore the neighborhood some, so I began to do that before I saw the van pull to a stop next to the sidewalk in front of me. Being wary, I picked the bike up and turned it on the sidewalk before biking back up the road. I went a bit slower than anyone should have, just to make sure they weren't stopping for a different reason than I thought. After about 30 seconds, they started driving and did a U-turn, driving back in my direction. So I naturally booked it, and when I knew they weren't able to see me, I turned into one of the cul-de-sacs on the road, dropping my bike behind a person's bush and waiting next to it, using the bush and other obstacles to cover me. I saw the car pull up and stop at the cul-de-sac entrance for a few seconds before turning the other way and driving around that branching neighborhood. I think I should explain my thought process on why I hid somewhere I would have been trapped if they entered. If I was them and I was trying to kidnap someone, I would expect them to go down the road that didn't trap them so they could keep running. So I chose the less logical option, as with some thought it becomes more logical. Anyways, after they drove onto the other road, I hopped on my bike and headed back to the direction I wanted to explore while thinking of contingency plans if they came back. But they didn't, and after 30 or so more minutes I went home, making sure no one followed me. I was on holiday with my family in Portugal. This was around the same time as the Madeleine McCann thing happened, for anyone who knows about that. I was about 7 at the time, and my older cousin was about 9, and I really looked up to him. We were at a birds of prey show with all of these different birds on different platforms. This guy announced a guest, and it was a middle-aged guy in a clown suit. It was all just a regular clown routine. My cousin said he was afraid of clowns, and me being curious, I asked why. He told me the story of Pennywise the clown from it and explained that was why he was afraid of clowns. At the time I laughed it off, but was pretty nervous of clowns all of a sudden. We left the show and began walking to a toilet restroom just outside of the show area. My dad asked me at the time if I needed to go really quick, and I said no thanks, I just wanted to go and do the next thing, even though I really did kinda need it. I waited outside with my mum, and we all as a family afterwards walked to a restaurant that was quite far away, like the other side of the park. We sat down at the tables in that restaurant, and my mum went up to order food. The line was huge, and we started waiting for 15 minutes or so. So my dad went up to help mum get the food. Just before he left the table with me and my cousins, I asked if I could go to the bathroom. He sighed because he literally asked just a minute ago but said sure. Now, as a 7-year-old child, I didn't automatically look around the restaurant for the toilet. I proceeded to walk all the way myself back across the park to where the restroom was outside the bird of prey area. When I went in, it was very busy from people presumably just out of another showing of this birds of prey thing. I waited for ages for a stall, and when there was one I went in. When I came out, the man from the show in the clown suit was there. He hadn't removed anything. He might have been on break or something, I'm not sure. I having this new fear of mine and being alone was terrified. I went up to the sink and began using it and immediately left the restroom. But as I left, I saw the colors follow me. I then ran around multiple corners and continued to go as fast as possible, but when I looked back he was still following. I went a different route from which I had used to go there and just kept running through very busy crowds looking back over and over. Eventually, after about 5 minutes of running, I finally looked back and he wasn't there anymore approaching me. I went back to the restaurant and my parents were very angry at me. I have no idea if the man was following me or not. Maybe he was following me to help me. Maybe it was my 7-year-old brain assuming the worst. But either way, I was afraid of clowns for years after that. I never actually told my parents about him either. I just told them I went to the restroom that was far away and got lost because I was silly. Anyway, sorry for the long post. When I was around 12, where I lived was about 1 block from a strip mall. Well, what we considered it in the slums of Tampa, Florida essentially just had a Babies R Us, Save a Lot, Guitar Center, Dollar General, a few other places I can't remember. And there was a Circle K, and behind it was a gay strip club sex toy shop. A few days before this incident was my birthday, so I had some birthday money, so when my grandmother and step-grandfather went to bed on the night of, I snuck out to go to Circle K to get a pop and an ice cream bar. When I was heading to Circle K and back home, passing through the strip club's parking lot was inevitable. So when I was going back, someone was calling me to their car, and being the idiot I was, I went. He was asking me how old I was, why I was out so late, if my mom knew where I was, and of course I answered truthfully. That's when he grabbed my arm and said with a completely different and sinister tone, "I think I should give you a ride home." I tried to move his hand and say no thank you, but to no avail. Then he opened his car door, which caused him to loosen his grip enough for me to get him to let go of my arm, but not my shirt, and I started panicking super hard and somehow got free, but with a ripped shirt covered in pop and ice cream. Now, instead of running to the bright-ass Circle K like a smart and sensible kid, I ran towards my house, which was on a back road, so no streetlights. While running, I heard his car start and drive towards the exit on the street I was running, so I hurried and jumped behind this large dumpster, hiding, hoping he didn't see where I went, and he drove by slowly, just yelling, "Hey son, I wanna give you a ride home," all the way down the street until he hit the net and he turned. Then I just heard him speed off. When I got home, I was shaking so badly, and I woke my grandmother and step-grandfather up and told them what happened. They called the cops. I gave a description. Then when the cops left, I got to feel nice and thick leather belt. I attended college in a wealthy city notorious for keeping homeless people out. One late night, my roommates and I were returning from campus when we decided to stop by McDonald's to grab something to eat. This MCD was near a grocery store and a few other shops, so there was this huge, empty parking lot. It was near midnight when we pulled up to the MCD. The whole parking lot was empty, except for a man wandering around. It was highly unusual for someone to be walking around that late in this town, and I was having uneasy feelings about it. But I thought I was overreacting and didn't mention anything to my roommates. After we got our food, my roommate left the MCD and started driving through the empty parking lot to exit. My other roommate was asleep in the front passenger seat while I sat behind her in the back. I was distracted for a few seconds and didn't realize my roommate was driving right towards this strange man. Suddenly, my gut instinct told me to look up, and I did. My roommate had literally stopped the car to stare at this man, who was standing right next to the front passenger door. I made eye contact with the man and his face was just rotten. Just like the zombies in the movies that were decaying. I stared into this man's eyes and there was no life. He stared back at me with his eyes widened and slightly tilting his head to the side. The man reached for the passenger door, which was unlocked. I yelled at my roommate to step on the gas, who was in a phase at the time. He finally snapped out of it and sped out of there. As we exit the parking lot, I turned back to look at the man one last time, and he was just watching us drive away. When we got back to our apartment, my roommate and I talked about what we saw. We both agreed he had a rotten, decaying face, but we couldn't find a logical explanation to what we saw. He could have been a homeless man, but I still can't shake off what I saw. The way he was walking around in the parking lot was so zombie-like. He didn't look like a living human being. The thought of his eyes and rotting face still give me the chills to this day. I was probably 15 at the time, and my cousin was 13. We always used to hang out on this warehouse roof in a parking lot of a park. There is a direct view from the roof down to the parking lot. We would usually hang out up there and see all the cars coming into the parking lot and hope they wouldn't see us. We were easily entertained. We would also just hang out up there during the day because it was just chill and nice up there. One night a car pulled up into the parking lot and the car door opened. We stopped looking in hopes no one would see us. About 30 seconds later we heard crying and screaming and what sounded like someone getting beaten up. I can't confirm if they actually were because we stopped looking cause we were scared lol. Keep in mind me and my cousin were having a sleepover and we snuck out of his house to go up there. The screaming noises scared the shit out of us and we jumped about 11 feet off the roof onto a hill and started running into some bushes. We hid behind a bush, but we were too loud and two guys wearing all black, or at least I think they were wearing black, it was hard to tell because it was dark out, but they started walking directly towards us then starting picking up the pace we immediately started bolting for the nearest fence and we made it over. They got about 20 feet from us before we got over a fence. That is the biggest rush I've ever felt in my life by far. We called the police, but nothing ever came from it. As we called them the next day we both were just in shock, but to this day I wonder what was going on in that parking lot. Not me, but my mother. My mom lived in Scarborough, Ontario in the late 1980s. She went out one evening in 1987 and went to a store. When she got out of the store it was dark, and as she walked to her car she was overcome by fear and she ran to her vehicle, unlocked it, and jumped in and locked the doors. Just as she locked the doors, a man was at her driver's side door and trying to get in. She said he smiled at her and just walked away calmly. She drove home, told my dad about it and then thought that was really weird but didn't call the police or anything. Years later, she saw him on TV. He had been arrested for rape and murder of 3 teenaged girls, Tammy Homolka, Leslie Mahaffey, and Kristen French. He was also charged with the rape of many women in the Scarborough area of Toronto. I always felt like I wasn't alone or being watched in my family's house when I was alone or late at night. It creeped me out so much that I slept with my closet door closed, blocked by stuff till I graduated high school. In my senior year around midnight my sister jumped off the second story of the house, her first suicide attempt. While on the phone with 911 and trying to keep her conscious until the ambulance showed up, the 911 operator had me ask her why she did it. Her response was, "It made me." Still fucks me up till this day and I never sleep well in that house ever again. There was other stuff that happened there, but too much to type it all over my phone. Update: since more people requested more info, here you go. So the piano downstairs would play music but would stop if you got halfway downstairs. The radio and TV would turn themselves on. My dog would sit at the end of the upstairs hallway and defend, bark at nothing except one time after my sister's attempt I saw a shadow figure enter my mom's bedroom at the end of the hallway. My sister's room was directly across the hall where it seemed to come from. Once my mom and I saw a face made of light on the wall after blocking all light to it and it still glowed. My mom freaked out and dragged me out of the house. The last time I stayed in that house I was with my husband and doing stuff to help me sleep in my sister's old room, and we saw this shadow figure about the size of a ceiling fan spread out with almost spider-like limbs still on the ceiling while the middle dropped down toward the bed, then it zoomed out the window. Same one my sister jumped from. So we decided nope, never again, and next year my parents sold the home and moved. Update: my sister is alive and well for those who messaged me about her. Also creepy things she did was stand over my bed staring at me, yep, just like in Paranormal Activity, so that movie scared the shit out of me. I ended up locked my bedroom door at night because of her. I also went downstairs one night after midnight cause I had a cold and couldn't fall asleep, so thought I'd make sleepy time tea. But my sis was just standing still in the middle of the kitchen, back to me, no lights on, so I noped out of there back to my room. My mom thought she saw people in the house once and came home a few times to all the lights on. Mom has OCD, so we were raised to turn off lights when leaving a room. My dad would hear people talking like they were downstairs, but when he called out the talking would stop. He also had the radio flip channels when he was alone. And last but not least, my sister-in-law stayed over one night, says she didn't sleep at all cause she swore she could hear screaming from my closet in my old bedroom. When I was a child I had waking nightmares with demonic entities, often the same demonic entity. It's obviously pretty horrifying waking up, or rather, thinking you have woken up and having the strange feeling that you are being watched, then looking around the room with your eyes wide open and spotting a horrifying entity with decaying demonic features in the room and then having it slowly advance toward you. Often this would happen while dealing with sleep paralysis, too, so I couldn't move or scream. I also heard a loud, frightening, and ghostly moaning noise in the basement of my empty house when I was a kid, which was presumably some sort of noise in a pipe, but sounded like someone in the room with me loudly moaning at me. I only ever heard it the one time, though I spent a lot of time in our basement, which housed our ping pong table and an area in which I could practice skateboard tricks on rainy days. On a different note, being lonely to the point that I could die for most of the last 6+ years is far worse than any spooky stuff. That's a different type of horror story, I guess. Also, if you fear death, the death anxiety prompted by the certainty of death can be quite bad and is maybe the worst feeling that I've ever experienced, slightly worse than the grief at the loss of a loved one, even. Also, having one's body age can be difficult, sad, and frightening.